Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. Welcome back to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. This is the Millennial Mom segment, and we have a topic today that truly resonates with parents everywhere. Joining us is Sarah Allen Benton. She's a licensed mental health counselor and advanced alcohol and drug counselor, and she's going to be here to discuss her new book, Parents in Recovery, Navigating a Sober Family Lifestyle. She's been a parent in recovery herself for over 12 years, and her work touches a growing community of parents looking for hope and structure in the often overwhelming landscape of recovery. Studies show that over 20 million Americans are currently living in recovery from substance use disorders, and many are parents who face the dual challenge of staying sober while raising children in a world filled with temptations and pressures. Her new book is a lifeline, offering tools to cultivate a healthy family environment while embracing a sober lifestyle. Let's dive in and explore what she has to share. Welcoming now to the show is the amazing Sarah Allen Benton. Welcome, superstar.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
So your book, Parents in Recovery, offers such a unique perspective in the crowded world of recovery literature. I thank you so much for joining me today because this is such an important topic that I'm really eager to explore and share from an expert's perspective. So a recent report from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration states that only 10% of people with substance use disorders receive specialized treatment. That's a pretty low statistic. Now, your book offers support for those navigating this journey, many of whom feel alone and under-resourced. So it's powerful, Sarah. In a space where parents are often expected to put themselves last, you're advocating for a structured, supported approach that doesn't just treat addiction, but considers the whole family. It's refreshing and a much needed shift. So can you talk to me a little bit about what motivated you to write this book?
Sure. I think you spoke to this is a crowded field of quit lit, but there was a missing piece for parents in recovery that was a nonfiction book with like a field guide, not just a memoir telling and depicting one person's story. I felt a calling to write this, and the voices of all of the parents in recovery in my book represent over 400 years of recovery. And I wanted to short circuit the process for people.
Wow. And studies show that children of parents in recovery are at a lower risk of developing substance use disorders themselves when parents are open about their
Mhm.
journeys. So, your book emphasizes the importance of transparency about addiction with children. Why do you believe, particularly in this approach, and how can parents start having these sometimes difficult conversations? Is there ever an age where it's too early to discuss these topics?
Well, this book really is promoting a lifestyle, right? A lifestyle of wellness and of recovery that gets transferred to your children. It's part of your family system. And so it's not just about speaking about the addiction component, but also teaching your children in advance coping skills, the things that we were missing that maybe led us down the wrong path as before we became parents or after we became parents. There are people I interviewed that had both scenarios. And in terms of the disclosure, I really think parents reflected that they had differing views on when they felt comfortable talking to their children about their own history. I think a lot of parents will let their children know, I don't use substances or drink, and they notice it, right? Because let's be honest, it's part of the mommy culture, it's part of our society, it's part of work culture. To have alcohol in the home and even at children's birthdays, parties. I mean, it's kind of everywhere. So you do stand out a little bit when you are in recovery, and your children notice that, but it's not always a bad thing. As far as the age of comfort to tell people, I really leave that up to a parent. However, I would, as a therapist, suggest that before your child is exposed to substances and alcohol in their own environment, through their school, through the community, that you have an honest conversation about the genetic components, as we would for diabetes, for cancer, for other conditions, to help set them up for success in this world. That substances are there. You can't hide in a hole somewhere. But also letting them know there's hope. That if you delay the onset of drinking to the age of 15, you can actually decrease the chance by 40% of developing an alcohol use disorder specifically. And that is
Wow.
huge news, regardless of your family history. So that means each year after that, you're decreasing the chance by 7% of having this condition. So the point is educating, arming our children with information that, we're not saying never ever drink or use a substance ever because it's somewhat unrealistic, maybe, but why don't you set yourself up for chances of maybe having a healthy relationship to alcohol in the future?
Wow. You are so spot on. And you're breaking down a wall that many parents in recovery feel they have to build to protect their children. I mean, it's refreshing to see transparency reframed as a powerful positive tool, and this might just be a game changer for so many families. Now, you share personal journal entries in Parents in Recovery, a choice that really humanizes the journey. What prompted you to share these, so to speak, private reflections, and how do they really help bridge the gap between theory and real life experience for readers?
Well, I actually started this new tradition in my books with my first book. I put my own journal entries into understanding the high functioning alcoholic. And I realized that, oh my gosh, I actually had journaled at significant points. And I I know in the self-help community, narratives are very healing and part of our tradition, and they're part of what people connect with. And to your point, they are the human part of all of this. So while I want to arm people with research and statistics and other women's and men's stories, I wanted to humanize myself because I come to this topic both as an addiction specialist, but also as a person in long-term recovery.
Your willingness to be vulnerable is truly inspiring. I mean, it's truly a reminder that recovery is ongoing and complex. So for readers, it must feel like they're right there with you, not alone in their struggles. And I love that you framed the book like that. And your book touches on social media's influence in our lives, a topic that really resonates widely today. The Journal of Youth Studies found that excessive social media use does in fact contribute to feelings of inadequacy and isolation, especially among young users. So, for parents in recovery, I imagine this pressure is compounded. What advice do you offer to help parents set boundaries and navigate the digital landscape in a way that really supports sobriety?
Those that have addictive issues are sometimes more prone to and vulnerable to the quick dopamine hits that were designed within social media. As parents in recovery, I think we have a heightened awareness of preventative measures. And when we see habits forming with ourselves or our children, we try to maintain some level of emotional sobriety and balance. And that's something we want to instill to our children. I think we also know that our children are at higher risk in some ways for addictive behaviors. And I do know that electronics are on top of mind because they actually enter our children's lives possibly before substances do. And they have a dopamine priming effect, which can then, for certain children that are more prone to impulsive behaviors, that are more prone to attention and focus issues, can affect their school, their academics, their connections. Those with social anxiety get stuck behind a screen instead of in front of people. However, it's not all bad. Post pandemic, there are social support groups, access to resources that are virtual that were never there before. So, as parents in recovery, we have more access to meetings that are easier to get to without childcare, and to a greater variety of self help meetings. So, I see that there's a blessing, but also pieces that you just need to be more mindful of.
Now, one of the unique aspects of your book is how you categorize parenting styles in the context of recovery, right? So, quote unquote, intrinsic, extrinsic, and hybrid. So, according to a study published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs, certain parenting styles are more effective in fostering resilience in children. Can you break down these categories for us and explain why these distinctions are so significant?
In my own personal case, I was not a natural parent. Parenting didn't come now. My nurturing nature didn't just happen the minute I gave birth to my daughter. And then I saw other parents where it just seemed to be what they were born to do. And I believe that all of that impacts our recovery and also our need to and our ease at which we live in our lives and in the different domains of all areas of our life. So what I was trying to figure out is there a correlation between if parents have ease at which they are parenting versus those that are just feeling like this isn't really my thing? And does that impact or decrease substance usage? I think that there were certainly some parents that parenting increased, and there are some that I interviewed that had relapses while they were parenting, started off sober, parenting was really the extra layer that kind of threw them over the edge, and they let go of their own self-care and didn't prioritize themselves. I think that there were other parents, this was really interesting to me, that had a trauma history, and that when they became parents, they became instinctually protective of their children, and also additionally cemented in their recovery and their mission to create a different life for their children than they had had. And that really surprised me in some ways, because I actually, because of my own experience, expected a lot of parents to feel a lot more vulnerability as a parent in their recovery, but many felt more convicted.
Wow. Wow, that's very deep. It's fascinating. Understanding that recovery can shape parenting choices not only enriches the parent child relationship, but as you say, it reinforces resilience. And this isn't just recovery, it's transformative parenting. Research from the National Institute on Drug Abuse shows that support systems greatly improve recovery outcomes. So, you advocate for building a robust support network both within the family and the larger community. Why is community so vital in recovery, Sarah? And what first steps do you recommend for parents looking to cultivate this kind of support?
Well, addiction is disconnection from yourself. Oftentimes it progresses to a point of isolation. I think many parents that were using substances maybe crossed a line where they started off social and partying and fun and ended up alone, or they were at events and just took things to a level where they were in their own world and felt alone and shame and guilt. So the antithesis of that for recovery is connection and social support. The other piece of it is that honestly, alcohol is part of our societal structure. And so when you remove yourself from that world or you make different choices around that, it's important to have another community or subculture in some sense that is supporting your lifestyle change, because you're going against the grain. Parents are obligated, I believe, to have long term recovery in finding other social supports. The first step in this really is to find somebody to be honest with. It starts with being honest with yourself, but then it can also be a loved one, a family member, a friend. Maybe you know somebody else that's in recovery or that struggled with this. The other part of it is connecting potentially with a therapist, even talking to a primary care physician. I know when I first got sober, I actually shared it initially with my OBGYN, which is kind of random, but they pointed me in the right direction. And that doesn't always happen. But hey, why not give a shot to people in the community that may be able to point us in the right direction? I also am just blown away by all of the different choices that people have to show up at a meeting, in meetings that are not just local anymore. Because remember, before, support groups used to have to be in your community. People would get embarrassed and scared to see people that they knew. And now they can attend self help meetings with people from different countries, from different states. There's something for everyone, because all of these different support groups have different philosophies. Some of them are religious, some are non religious, some are so that some are divided by gender, and then within some of those there's men's meetings, women's meetings. So I think that there's no excuse to not connect. And I do know the secret to long-term recovery is having social support.
Wow, you really have it all covered. You're reshaping the narrative that recovery is a solo journey that is not a solo journey, and really highlighting the strength that comes from surrounding yourself with positive, understanding people, and that's an empowering shift for anyone listening. It really truly is. Now, you're equipping parents with a toolkit essentially that helps them to stay grounded even when life throws them challenges. And I think that this really emphasizes recovery as a resilient, adaptable lifestyle. So now let's chat self care. Self care often feels like a luxury, especially for parents, but you argue it's a necessity. The American Psychological Association notes that self care is one of the most effective ways to combat burnout and stress. So, can you walk us through some self care practices that you believe are absolutely essential for parents in recovery?
Sure. And to be piggyback on that, there was a Surgeon General report about the stressors that parents are under that was released this past year, and it was just astounding. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm drowning in the parenting piece, for some of us, we got sober before we had children. So then you add that other layer on, and it feels almost impossible sometimes to quote unquote put yourself first. However, what I really emphasize again is back to this lifestyle approach where it's understood within your family system that these things are requirements. Like we sit down and eat meals, right? We exercise, we do healthy things, but we also have downtime. We take time for ourselves. Children that are growing up in a home with parents in recovery know when they say I'm on a meeting, this is my time, they start to adapt. It becomes normal. Um it's not all of a sudden this shock to them if this is what they're used to. I do think parents that get sober, after their children are used to them being a different way and possibly giving everything of themselves to a point where they can't maintain it, may have a little bit of resistance to, mommy or daddy needs a little bit of space and time, and also asking for additional support from your partner, delegating more, and setting limits and boundaries within your friendships. That can be hard for people at first, but those that have been living within this lifestyle it starts to get normalized over time. But it isn't optional, because the truth is that when parents who are doing too much get sober, they're unable to maintain. So alcohol and substances are a band-aid. They're not allowing you to really feel how actually overwhelmed you are. And so when you remove that, the truth comes out and you start to realize that things may have been taking on too much, and it's harder to hide.
Wow. You are brilliant, my dear. So true. And you're challenging the guilt that often accompanies self-care for parents and reframing it as something vital. And this resonates with so many listeners who feel stretched thin but want to do what's best for their families. So you are doing God's work, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, more importantly, for sharing your insights and your courage with us today. Your book, Parents in Recovery, is truly groundbreaking. It's going to be a resource that I think reminds us all that while recovery may start as a personal journey, its impact is truly family wide. So, to every parent out there navigating these challenges, this book offers wisdom, practical tools, and more importantly, hope. You can find Parents in Recovery and learn more about Sarah's work at bentonbhc.com. And remember, recovery is not just about abstinence. It's about creating a future where every family member can thrive. You could head to the Instagram page at Parents in Recovery. You could head to their Facebook support group, Parents in Recovery Support Group, right on Facebook. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. That was our Millennial Mom segment. We'll be right back after this.